In this video, I'm going to become Empress of Rome, bang Cleopatra, bring down the patriarchy, and maybe review Expeditions Rome while I'm at it. Let's begin. Expeditions Rome is a turn-based RTS set just before Rome begins its ascension into empire status. You create your Roman and lead a party of up to, at times, 14 different warriors into battle in the name of Rome. While doing so, you level them up, equip them with fancy gear, explore, do quests, and find new friends and enemies, all while being in charge of your very own Roman legion. Roma Invicta, baby. Now, right off the bat, this game had me excited. I'm a huge fan of turn-based strategy games owing to my love of D&D, and I have more than my fair share of map staring under my belt. So you can understand that when I heard of a game that combined the two, RTS, turn-based and grand strategy, I knew I had to play it. The Rome setting was just an added bonus.
Are you not entertained?
I'll start by saying that there really is two separate games here. Much like Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, you have your turn-based RTS RPG where you go around with your party and fight enemies as you come across them, and then you've got your pseudo-strategy game where you control your army, manage, I guess, what you could consider an economy, and conquer territory in the name of Rome. These two are intrinsically linked, of course. You need to conquer land to progress the story after all. Doing well in the strategy aspect gives you rewards in the RTS aspect, but on the whole, they are two entirely separate models. And let me tell you, one is the core of this game and wants to carry Expeditions Rome into greatness, and the other is a waste of developer resources. Now, I promise I will elaborate what I mean by that later, but first let's talk about the better of the two modes, the turn-based RTS RPG. To start off with, there are 4 classes to choose from, with each class having 3 relatively long skill trees. Each class is vastly different from each other, getting access to its own weapons, armor, and skills, and each pathway to take in each class does make them play very differently. Take the Triaries for example. They can either become a healer, a support character who utilizes powerful buffs and debuffs, or what I nicknamed the Shredder, where your humble healman, armed with a simple stick, becomes a god of whirring destruction. Now, the balance of the 4 classes is good as well, and while some classes will woefully underperform in the damage department, looking at you, Principe, the extra health, passives, and abilities that some classes come with make bringing at least one of the 4 classes to every encounter a must. Speaking of encounters, the combat in Expeditions is really where it excels. It is more similar to XCOM in how it plays than fantasy games like Pathfinder or Divinity Original Sin, but don't go expecting 180 different enemy types like you would see in Pathfinder. You are introduced to every enemy type you will come across quite early into the campaign. We are talking about a game set in a realistic version of Rome after all. Don't take this to mean that things will become dull, however. I found that the way that this game scaled difficulty was virtually perfect. It wasn't necessarily a case of making things have more HP or do more damage. Rather, the game scales enemies appropriately, gives them more abilities, gives them more tactical items to use, and changes the layouts and mission objectives of maps to suit the fact that your characters, in classic RPG fashion, slowly turn into gods by the end of the game. Now, I'm going to ashamedly admit that I did not play this game on the hardest difficulty. I will show the difficulty that I did play at, roughly about 20% of the time, to test the difficulty settings, but most of my time was spent on pure medium. I'm a game journalist, people, you can't expect much more. What I will say, however, is that when I put this game on the hardest difficulty, my god did I feel like I was a trapped animal. There are multiple sliders for difficulty setting, and they all add differing ways to fuck you. My favourite to leave on, however, was the insane AI setting. This makes the AI smarter, more ruthless, more cunning, and generally more enjoyable. For anyone wanting to play this game, for the best time, I recommend playing with all settings set to medium except the AI. Turn that baby to insane. You will thank me later. Being made to use my abilities and making things challenging without being unfair made the game a much better experience for me, and I think you'd enjoy it too. These difficulty settings get made all the worse for you when you realize that the AI can also utilize the map and control it against you, rather than vice versa. Every map is really well made. They, for the most part, feel real, and there is always an abundance of opportunities to lure the AI into choke points, and also get lured into choke points, but we won't talk about those moments.
I'll just lie down and rest my eyes.
Moving on to the story in Expeditions, and I will say that it is passable. I enjoyed some of the smaller stories in it, such as the Cleopatra questline and the Conquest of Greece, but the overarching Big Daddy story really wasn't engaging for me. I cannot get into it without spoiling the entire thing, but throughout the course of the game you are doing things specifically to stop big events from happening with the goal of thwarting the baddies' plans. This is pretty standard stuff and the plot of 96% of all video games in history, but in this game, the bad guy seems to always win no matter what you do. Now, there are multiple storylines and multiple bits of dialogue for just about every bit of dialogue, but from my character's perspective, she perfectly thwarted the baddies' plans, and at the end of the wars, all of the wars she fought by the way, she got told, well, the bad guy still got everything he'd wanted, he's an ultra spy and you can't do anything about it, and he's just going to gloat in your face and you're just going to have to sit around and suck thumbs. Now, like I said, there are multiple paths to finishing the game. There are multiple paths to finishing just about every single quest. I never did get to sleep with Cleopatra after all.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
But the main story is just a case of someone being 17 steps ahead of you no matter what you do, with everything you do playing right into their hands every single time, and they just seem to always win. It just wasn't very fun for me to do everything right and then just get simply told you failed. Having said all that, there is one really big positive about this journey. The journey you embark on in this game is a very memorable one. A lot of the quests you do along the way are very, very entertaining, and the voice acting is always good. The world is immersive as fuck as well. Every character speaks with a very deliberately Latinized version of English, and it really helps set the scene of the game. This all really helps with the RPG elements as well. Despite the railroaded nature of the long-term main plot of the game, I thoroughly enjoyed making decisions and trying to really play my character faithfully to what I envisioned her being. A woman forced into a war zone due to troubles at home, who quickly proves just how deadly and effective she can be. She is granted control of an entire legion. She conquered and conquered. Yet despite her achievements, her lack of a dick left her being disrespected at every turn. She couldn't own property, she couldn't join government, she couldn't even win the respect of the men whom just a week ago hailed her as a hero when they thought she were a man. Rome wanted to use and abuse Bibula Car, conqueror of Greece, but due to its sheer discrimination and backwards thinking, gave birth to Empress Bibula Car, slayer of the Senate. Sorry, I got a bit ahead of myself there. I enjoyed playing Bibulika. Now that is it for the story. It's a bit of a mixed bag. The overall story itself is a bit poor based on the railroaded nature of it, but the journey you have to go through, the quests you do, the middle stories, the character development, the character quests, those are all really good. But what about the loot? One of my favourite parts, and I believe most important bits of any RPG, is getting cool skills and cool loot. And well, it's a bit of a mixed bag here too, though that is not through lack of loot. The loot is plentiful. There is also quite a cool skills system in this game, where your skills are based on what weapons you have. For MMO lovers out there, think of the system in Guild Wars 2, except much better. Some swords have some skills, while other swords have others. Some skills combine the power of two weapons, and some skills can only be used when both weapons are equipped. This makes the decision on what weapons to use more than just about their stats. Do you want a shield that offers more protection, or do you want a shield that it makes it easy to whack things? The decision is yours, and I really did enjoy this system. You will discover new skills on your weapons as you loot higher tier enemies as well, keeping things fresh. A new weapon might do less damage overall, but it might overall be much more useful. Now, I know I've been singing the equipment and loot's praises for the last 2 minutes, but there is an issue with it, and that is that it never feels substantial. Your weapon skills and stats are always completely random, with the game never giving you control over what skills a weapon acquires. And unless you find a legendary, there is no way to craft your perfect weapon. You can make 20 daggers and never get the highest damage roll and skill combination you want. It might sound ridiculous to complain about this after mentioning this as a strength, but as I got to the end of this game, not having optimized gear just kind of drove me nuts. I made so many daggers that I ran out of crafting materials, and none of them even compared to my character's basic level dagger that he got from some random enemy in the middle of some stupid forest. Legendary items are also few and far between. Getting them often requires choosing the right dialogue options or ransacking the correct fucking abandoned shithole, and like I said, they are few and far between. You can dismantle outdated legendary items and put their unique bonus on other items, which is a bonus, but this doesn't add much to the actual enjoyment. It's hard to say really. The equipment and loot section has quite a few strengths. It just never feels impactful, important, or fun to engage with. Now, moving on to that waste of developer resources I mentioned, the grand strategy, army control, and war parts of the game. While learning to edit videos, I learnt of a phrase called kill your darlings. Essentially meaning don't leave something into a project just because you thought of it, want it in there, you think it's cool, or whatever. Make sure the quality of your project comes above all else. And this is something that I believe the developers of Expeditions Rome got wrong. They didn't kill their darling. I cannot understate just how uninteresting and dull this is. I cannot think of even a single moment that I actually enjoyed of it. First off, let's start with the battles. This is where you are supposed to lead your legions, and sure, this is one way of describing what you do, But essentially, for every battle, you fight in 4 phases. Each phase, you choose one of 3 cards the game gives you. They have some stat or some ability, but it really doesn't matter. You win every single battle and that's it. Once you've done that, the game tells you to go and pacify the land before you can consider it yours. This involves a stupid quest where you need to go kill 10 dudes or blow up 10 boxes filled with something you don't give a shit about, and the worst part here is that the game forces you to use your outcast companions, the ones who don't talk or offer anything to your experience. You can't use your fully voice acted companions with personality for some reason, and the game doesn't even let you use your main character for these missions. It's beyond stupid. It feels like just about every aspect of this mechanic is designed to slow you down. Your legion can only do one thing at a time and it does it slowly as hell. What's worse is that the game simulates armies taking back control of territory by forcing you to station your legion whenever they attack, further slowing down your conquests. There are also silly events like the foxes are attacking that will always injure your characters, forcing you to go back and heal them, wasting even more time. This mode just has you overall going back and forth for no reason, and it just sucks. Just like how Pathfinder's army mechanics lowered the quality of that game, the army mechanics in Expeditions lowers the quality of this game. The battles are auto-resolve simulators at best. It takes forever to capture everything you need, and you do need to capture everything so that you can access upgrades that you can get in your army's tents and stuff, and it just doesn't work. You get a brief respite from this, and it does become more manageable when the game is merciful and grants you 2 legions to control. You can conquer stuff much more quickly at that point, but it ruins that by taking the legion off you in the next act. This mechanic never changes, it never gets interesting, and the game suffers all the more for it. The worst part is that this mechanic kills the exploration and continuity of the game. There is hardly any actual running around involved here, and what little there is mostly reserved for the big cities and stuff like that. Instead, you traipse around the world map and the game often just drops you into the middle of a far larger group of enemies that, according to the story, you often had the surprise jump on in the first place. Now, I understand that I was probably very heated talking about the army mechanics just then, and the truth is that they aren't that bad. They just don't add anything to the game. It is something I needed to put up with to get to the actual bits I wanted to play, nothing more. Moving on to more negativity now, however, and these are things that at the start of the game I didn't notice and I didn't care about, but by the end of the game, I was so entirely frustrated with these things and I wish they weren't in the game, and I do believe that they could be patched if the developers wanted to. First up is the turn times. You have to wait for every single NPC to have their turn individually. Now take the fact that there are often up to 20 NPCs on the field and that each motherfucker takes up to 10 seconds to climb a damned ladder, throw a torch, and then you can understand the problem. Your own party's turns can often take less than a minute, and then you have to suffer through waiting multiple minutes just for turns to complete. Now this isn't bad all the time, I will say. It is more often in the big siege battles and the battles where there are multiple different groups of armies all fighting for the same thing. When it gets really bad, you can sometimes be waiting up to 3+ minutes. I went to take a piss, grab a new beer, sat down, and they still weren't done with their turn. It was a big irk, but I'm going to talk about our next one now. Next up is the tooltips, and this is where I get very frustrated with games. The tooltips in this game and most other games ever made are all 70% complete. What I mean by this is that they might give you the factual information about what is happening on an item or a skill, but they won't elaborate. For example, an item might say, this gives you low profile, and that's it. They won't tell you what low profile is, it won't tell you how long it has it for, it won't tell you any extra information. I don't understand why games still do this. Tooltips have been made fantastic in some games. Consider Crusader Kings 3 for example, where there's hyperlinks on top of hyperlinks, and you can spend as long as you want figuring out how shit works, and you never need to leave the game or anything like that. I will forever hold this as the gold standard, and every game that I play that has shit tooltips will get a whinge from me. I promise you that much. Now onto the thing that left me uncontrollably raging. The unfathomably stupid mechanic in this game, catapults. These rock-throwing lumps of junk seem cool at first. The game gives them to you and lets you just throw rocks at hordes of AI in rocky annihilation. Except no, that's not what fucking happens. The AI has some sixth fucking sense as to where the catapults are gonna land. They will maneuver themselves perfectly to avoid the hexes that the catapult drops on, and bugging me sideways, it's annoying. I assume this is because the game would be unbalanced if you could just simply kill everything from afar, but why give me the catapults in the first place? Just save me from having 10 different fucking aneurysms and remove them from the game. Straight up remove them. They are not worth the frustration. Now the final gripe I have, and this really doesn't take away from the quality of the game, but it's the inventory management. It's not the best. You can't sort your items by type, and dismantling items takes forever. Considering the amount of items you can sometimes get, it is just a chore to have to dismantle every single one individually. It can be a slog. Just have a look at this. Okay, so the great news about those nitpicks is that if the developers were benevolent, the speed, the catapults, and inventory management could straight up be fixed. I know I can't be the only one who feels this way about those mechanics. The unfortunate thing is that they really do take quite a lot away from an otherwise really good game. The core of what you have here is super solid. The combat is fun, the strategy involved in the combat is just fantastic, and the story keeps you entertained enough throughout the game to really keep you wanting to know what happens next and keep playing more. The game really activates your big brain, and there are puzzles in the game that can be solved. It just is an enjoyable experience. The replay value is high, and the game's polish is very, very, very good. For those reasons, my rating out of 10, with 6 being in the average, is gonna be a 7. I liked the game, the parts of it that were fun, the combat, the quests, the strategy involved in the combat were all really, really good. And all the negatives I mentioned, they really have nothing to do with the actual core aspects of the game. The core is great, it is just the added time wasting that happens that really fucks up this game. The army mechanics and the turn timers especially can really lead to some frustration towards the end. For those of you looking for your next dose of Rome or strategy or both, I think you'd really enjoy this game. If not, I would highly recommend you check out the studio's last game, Expeditions Vikings, which from what I understand, even though I haven't played it, is a better game due to the lack of the other stuff that really drags it down. Now that is it for now. For those of you who want to see more PC related gaming reviews and content, hit the like and subscribe button, I'm sure you won't regret it. And for those of you who want to learn about the horrible future of gaming, watch this video right now. My name is Cameron, thanks for watching the Aussie Perspective, I'll see you next time.